Zach Tudor, Megan Samford, Ralph Langner. Ralph, welcome back. You were missed last year.
Yeah, I know.
At least by me.
I didn't, and you know that, because now I get to be the sole first place.
I always enjoy having them on the stage at the closing panel. And the question I like to ask, and Ralph, I'll start with you since you didn't get to opine on this last year. And it doesn't have to be specific to S4, but at S4 or in the ICS security community in general, what are we not talking about or working on that we really should be? Where are we missing?
Yeah. Okay, I think this is becoming redundant. If you remember, for those old-timers, if you remember last time I sat on that podium, I was pointing out, well, we didn't talk about high-profile cyber-physical attacks because there were none. Right? Instead, we have been talking about because the lazy-ass hackers didn't deliver. Right? All those time slots reserved for late-breaking content, right? They didn't deliver. Instead, we have talked about how to be more creative, maybe wearing costumes would help. We have talked about S-bombs, how they could be related to vulnerabilities, etc. And in my opinion, this is certainly, first of all, a good thing that we didn't see critical cyber-physical attacks, right? That's very good. Some will certainly take that as an argument, well, problem solved. So why should we invest more into OT security? Because there are none of these high-profile attacks that the community has always been warning us about. And here is where I see a rising problem. So on the one hand, we have this very fortunate development that everything stayed calm in a way. And on the other hand, most of our narrative relies on the idea that the attackers are constantly getting more well-funded, the attacks are getting more complex, but nobody sees that in real life, okay? So that is a problem. And I think this should lead us to consider probably we should try to change the narrative. And in that respect, my thoughts are aligned with Dale's opening keynote. Let's try to think differently, even just for the sake of the argument. Let's experiment. And I would want to share what this tells me. So we didn't see high-profile cyber attacks, but certainly we did see several low-profile attacks. In my opinion, what we should focus much more on is this class of opportunistic attacks that ranges from your average ransomware attack to the well-publicized attacks that do have a cyber-physical angle, such as in Oldsmar, Oldsmar, Florida, the water event, which I also would classify as an opportunistic attack. Now, if that could make some sense, it would lead me to the conclusion we should probably also work much harder on those low-hanging fruits, like the vulnerabilities that are most likely to be exploited, rather than focusing so much on those scenarios, those super critical scenarios, cyber war and those catastrophic events, high consequence. Dale has been hammering on that for a couple of years. I did that myself a couple of years ago. I told the audience how you can blow up a nuclear power plant with a cyber attack. Yes, but all of that really didn't hit the nail on its head, in my opinion. So maybe it's time to also, at least as an alternative, focus on those low-yield attacks, and that also means focusing on those vulnerabilities that have the most likelihood to get exploited. And in my opinion, this is something that we could address rather well if we would accept the idea that then we had to change our tune, so not always come up with these scary scenarios that most people, just among us, they are thinking we are bullshitting them anyway. This can never happen. They're just making this up in order to get the funding. So I would argue or propose to tone it down a little bit and therefore try to get more outreach and also enable all those good people who come here to get home with something that is actionable, that can be put to real use in real world environments rather than those threat scenarios that are high in the sky. You know, in my opinion, the OT security battle that we are fighting, it doesn't occur in outer space. It's a land battle. It happens in the trenches.
Okay. Well, Megan, he touched a lot of stuff there in terms of threat. Do you have any thoughts on what we actually saw the last year? Because, you know, Ralph said we didn't see a lot of big stuff, at least not publicly announced. And do you like the approach of starting to work on the easier things, the ransomware and the things that are occurring more often, or what's your take on this?
Well, it's not easy. I didn't say that.
Let's say easier from an attack perspective, the more common, simple attack as opposed to the super complex Stuxnet thing.
So I don't disagree with the statement, but I don't think it's an or scenario. I think it's probably an and scenario. And what we don't do a good job of just self-identifying in this community as is that cyber is a disaster science. I'm going to say it again. Cyber is a disaster science, but we don't behave like a proper disaster science, like the management of hurricanes or floods or any other type of natural disaster or man-made disaster. Cyber is the only one that really doesn't behave like the others. That being said, I want to play a little experiment with you all, but it's going to be fun and it's not going to be hard. So I want you all to participate and raise your hand, and I'm going to see you all that don't raise your hand, okay? So this is the scenario. You're a company and you have the opportunity to purchase products, ICS products, IoT products, whatever product, okay? Product A is a product that we're going to pretend, although this is not the truth, anyone that's done product development, that this product is completely free of vulnerabilities at the time of shipping. You're like, this thing looks so good, it is completely free of vulnerabilities, I'm so happy with it. That's product A. Product B is a product that has had some testing on it. Maybe you've been able to find some vulnerabilities, but maybe you don't feel like you have the full picture on the vulnerabilities, or you don't feel that the testing has been exhaustive enough, right? We can never test enough, but product B is full of security features. It has signed firmware, it has event logging, it has secure boot, it has renewable security. What product do you want to pick? I want to see hands for product A. Who wants product A? If you had to buy it today in your procurement, who's buying product A?
No one.
See? Can't find them. Okay.
One.
Okay, one person wants to buy product A. Who wants to buy product B? I like it. And it's a better result than I thought, because I honestly expected kind of a mixed room, because we fall, and it's not a trap of vulnerabilities. I'm not saying don't focus on the vulnerabilities. As customers, you should absolutely demand a proper SDLC and proper testing of your product, right? We should always be doing that. But just like in emergency management or disaster science, we know that hurricanes are coming, storms are coming, floods are coming. We don't pretend that we can stop everything that will be coming, but we put in proper defenses and proper protective measures so that it's not going to hurt us as bad when it happens. And so if I have one action for all of you to take, is that truly be a product B community. Like, I love to obsess and talk about threat intel and all the sexy stuff, and believe me, I can get down with it as much as anybody else. But when it comes to it, you need to be holding everyone in the community accountable to delivering products and systems that have security features in there. 62443 is the standard that all of the vendors in the industrial space are building to. When you want to hold us accountable, say in your RFPs, I want security level 2. Say that you want that at a minimum. Hold us accountable, create the market pressure, because many people have said, oh, you know, the standards, they're so slow, the adoption, they're like an Encyclopedia Britannica. I'm not going to argue over that. In fact, I agree. But in the absence of regulation, we need to increase market incentive, and we need to see customers actually asking for these things. And so I asked myself, why don't we talk about security features, but we're talking about IDSs and all of these other things that, yes, you should have it, and Megan Samford is not saying, oh, Megan Samford said don't buy an IDS and don't do this and that. No, I didn't. I said you want that and you want secure products and systems.
On your A and B choice, when I asked you that question about Ralph, you said it's not an or, it's an and.
It's an and scenario.
Isn't your A and B an and as well?
Well, you want both, but I mean, let's face it, the entire industry is sitting at like SL0, SL1 maybe. I mean, some vendors have been trying to crank out certifications to, again, artificially create competition where I'm like, all right, who's got the most certifications? Is it ABB? Is it Siemens? Is it Schneider, GE? You know, where's everybody at? Can we get into a healthy competition? And customers should be asking for the certifications.
Yeah. I'll bring you in just a second, but there's one other, let me ask one other.
Let me interrupt, please, because this gets us back to a trope that we see all the time in OT security discussions. I love this trope, which is, well, we have to do both. And sometimes I try to poke into that direction and in that thinking on my LinkedIn bullshit posting that I do there. So it is funny in a way because we are talking so much about prioritization, but when it comes to the foundational concepts, the community finds themselves incapable of prioritization. And why do I point the finger to that? For a very simple reason. You know what the biggest requirement is for your OT security success? It's funding, it's budget. And let's be real, we're totally underfunded. And if only for that reason, you will always have to make that choice. Otherwise, your manager will make that choice. So I mean, let's keep it real here. We don't have the luxury. In a perfect world, everybody would agree, oh, we do all of that. Yeah, but we can't because we're underfunded. Excuse me for the interruption. Zach.
Well, no, I did. I mean, it's a little bit related to funding. And you're with Schneider Electric now, and you have, I can never remember if it's Modbus Secure or Secure Modbus, but the Modbus now has a rapid TLS certificate-based solution, and we now have something for Ethernet IP. And I think I said this last year, from what I see, the pickup is extremely low on these. And at some point, if we build these secure products and the customer base doesn't use them, for a long time, I blamed the vendor. I was like, if I have a client who wants to be secure, they have no choice. They can't do it. Well, now they have some choices, and the pickup is really low. So at what point does the vendor start to be smart to say, why am I wasting my money? My clients don't want this. Do you want to take a swing at that, or should I go to Zach?
Oh, you're going to ask me about vendors and adoption? No, that's not me. But no. So it has been the age-old thing. We used to say that, before. You couldn't get this. And I think companies like Schneider and others have been forward-leaning in developing a lot of these security protocols over the years. And I think at this point they can't stop. Their secure development life cycles, the way they're going to be making better, more secure tools, because I think in the long run it is going to be good for them. And it will be good for the people, the asset owners, users, and others that will get these more secure products. The question is that those vendors that may still be left out there that aren't making secure products may still get more of a share than they should.
Now I'll give you your chance. What are we not talking about that we should?
Well, I was looking at, I was waiting for something about how to exploit vulnerabilities in spy balloons. This audience here should have been all on top of that.
That was the late breaking, right?
That should have been late breaking, although it's been breaking and breaking and breaking. But I like some of the things that we were talking about, and as you featured before, metrics and measures. I don't know whether it was S4 number 1 or number 2 when INL, we came out and talked about ideal-driven metrics. Yeah. And I looked back at it when you talked about that, and I said, yeah, we were measuring things that about performance as opposed to impact. And we said, we like to count the things we can measure, but we don't measure the things that count, right? And so we have to get to more of that. So, some of the things, rogue change days, how long was a vulnerability in your system? We can't prove that makes you more or less secure, but we feel it does. But as the insurance speaker talked about, earlier, we really don't have, long-term metrics, actuarial data, and as, Andy Bachman said, and even that data, may be obsolete tomorrow. So it's very hard. So I think that what we have to do is build security in any of the methodologies that we talk about, look at limiting consequences, provide resilience, be able to, do all of these steps in the NIST framework and be able to limit damage, recover, and get back going.
And pray to God that everything plays out.
Megan, I don't know if your first comment was your item, but I want to give you a shout. What are we not talking about that we should? Is it the secure product part? And if so, do you have any feel, maybe as kind of I lob that out there, do you have any feel about what it's going to take to get customers to pick this up?
Yes, so what we're not talking about is security features within products and systems. We've been obsessed with vulnerabilities. I'd like us to be as equally obsessed with security features. I think that you're seeing a slower adoption because I don't think it's easy for procurement departments and all of these other departments that are consulted or involved in buying product. It's not easy for them in many cases to decipher, what am I really asking for, and is there a simple way to ask for it? So I've just started telling people when they want to know what to ask for, just ask for security level 2, because I don't know that most of the industry is at security level 2 or can even meet it today, but we kind of have to shoot higher to create a market force and mechanisms so that all the vendors just by default are building to security level 2, because anyone who's been a part of a business, like, we're competing against functional requirements and products that customers are willing to pay for today. And so if we're working with offer management or others and they're like, hey, they want this safety feature and they want these other things, and this is, we're not going to do well if we can't get this road mapped in. Security features are typically they're included in the product development process. And so in order to make it easier to prioritize those features, to your point, Dale, customers have to say that they're asking for it, and it can't just, this room is not big enough to compel a market shift. I mean, maybe we are, but ask for security level 2 at least. If your procurement people know nothing else, just say security level 2, and they can write that down and they can implement that.
Yeah, it's okay to take the applause. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But and I also want to go back to that. So security features is one part, and once again, let's do both. But also secure build, secure lifecycle, right? There are products out there that have security features that are not secure themselves. We have to make sure that we do both, and so being able to both certify the processes that you use to make your product, building security in, building ways to identify threats and mitigate them, but also the features. Vendors know how to put features in. Right? And that's what we've been seeing. Oh, yeah, so safety's built in because we've been doing that for a long time. Features, that's what you're selling anyway. Oh, what about the security artifacts? What were the requirements for security on this product at design phase 0 that are tracked all the way through? That's what we also need to do, not just the features, but the security itself.
So before you get carried away too much with this thought that I think in principle everybody agrees here in this room, well, that's a great idea. I would like to point you to the timeline that is associated with that, right? So we are talking about new products or features, new features in existing products. And when will these new products, once that they're shipping, and let's just hope that asset owners will actually buy those products and not the cheaper version without the security features, because they just cost less. When would that penetration of these new products be significant, so that it would make a difference? Or in other words, what difference does it make over the next 5 or 10 years? And let me give you some pointers for thinking about this question. First, there is a ton of very important automation components that we'll probably never see, or not in the next 20 years, we'll never see security add-ons. I'm thinking, for example, about VFDs, actuators, right? So if you didn't know, they are usually these days, they're also network connected. They're reachable from your level 3 RAN, just route through all those additional networks, and then you're at the actuator, and some of these VFDs have known vulnerabilities, okay? So how long would that take to upgrade the millions of VFDs in our manufacturing space? That's going to take another 10 or 20 years, okay? And then if I also consider on the other hand what really bothers me, because I've been focusing you already on those low-hanging fruits with the vulnerabilities that will probably most likely be exploited. When we're having this discussion, does anybody of you, I think some of you will know, but who has an idea how many Windows 7 boxes you're still operating, right? That, in my opinion, would be, by the way, an excellent metric, since we have been discussing metrics, okay? So I'm trying to point you back to the prioritization. We have these great ideas, everybody will agree on those, but if you want to get some additional urgency in there, right? So what are our most pressing problems? And I would probably more tend towards, well, let's just get rid of those damn Windows 7 installations for once, or all those Adobe Flash players, very fun, still hundreds of thousands in OT environments. So just as a thought before you get too worked up with those security features.
Yeah, Ralph, we're always trying to save the world 5 years from now. What's new?
Well, I'm not going to, you're really tempting with security level 2, but the 62443 community is already angry enough with me, so I'm going to just switch to the next topic, because I've heard, we chatted a little bit online about things, and there were a lot of thoughts about the workforce. Because we've heard, first of all, we've seen some great things here, a lot of new faces, a lot more diversity, a lot more women, just people coming in from different fields, different countries. So we've seen some real improvement here, but you still hear this constant mantra that we have a huge workforce issue in security in general, technology in general, ICS security being maybe a prime example of that. But Zach, I know, think a lot about this. You've talked about that in past years. Yep. Is it as bad as people say, and what's the way forward?
Well, I think that for venues like this, it's worse than we've known before, because I think that there are several other new technology realms that are noticing that they're going to be upgraded too, and they're competing with us for a lot of those STEM graduates, those engineering graduates. So whether it's Micron building fabs here in the U.S. as opposed to overseas, and needs 7,000 smart people in Boise, Idaho, and they need 25,000 smart people in New York. We need power engineers to do all of this smart energy, microgrids. Nuclear power is taking off again. We're building reactors everywhere, and they're all competing for the same mind share of folks that we want to be here in cybersecurity and OT security as well. But I also say, I was talking to Ralph about this before, and he'll hit me again. When we build more secure systems, we will, I believe, start cutting that workforce gap down. So we'll only have half the terrible problem that we think we have right now. So maybe we can stop the rise in our workforce problem. But also industry, governments, academia, we're all working together now. We've seen the problem. We're sharing curriculum. We're sharing best practices. We have an ICS community of practice that the national labs, INL, and others with academia and universities are actually having working groups to develop and share curriculum across the nation, so that everyone's not rolling their own as we've been for the last 10 or more years. So we're identifying the problem and we're working on it, but it's still a problem.
Yeah, I think that I have to say the term cyber hygiene was discussed at least once on stage. We keep adding to this list of cyber hygiene, right? It's more and more and more and more things, and a lot of those are very human intensive. There's some level of automation, but you require more and more people to do this. So it would be great if we got over that hump and we started to say we don't need as many people, which would certainly be part of it. But I actually see the trend we're still sloping the wrong way on that one.
And before you go to them, one of the things I've always said is if you look at security mechanisms, over the centuries, the only one that seems to no longer be used is the moat, right? So we've added, gates, guards, guns, gadgets, gizmos, right? Oh, if I buy this new product, can I get rid of my IDS? No, you need your IDS too. Well, what about, can I get rid of, doing penetration testing? You need to do that too. So we're finding more areas of vulnerabilities, more classes of vulnerabilities, and then we need to go chase them all. So again, no, the problem's not getting easier. But once again, I think, we have to get smarter.
Well, Ralph, you have a growing company. You're hiring all the time, all sorts of people. What is it a problem? How bad is it out there?
No, I would say it's a little bit different in my opinion, and also I wouldn't want to compare our situation as a software company to the situation of all the asset owners, and I think that's the major issue here, right? So we're doing just fine, and if I want to analyze the situation for the asset owners, I think the idea that we totally lack the talent, that is a misconception. And hear me out, I'll tell you why. Because many of the big problems that we face in OT security have to do or go back to the exploding digital complexity that we're facing. Everything is going to be networked, connected to everything else. And that is not a linear development, it's an exponential development. And we will never be able to keep up by adding more people to the workforce, because you can only do that in a linear manner. You cannot address this exponential growth in digital complexity. And for that reason, I think, no, we're doing actually pretty good if we continue to focus on quality rather than quantity. We will not be able to meet our challenges just by adding more headcount, because the problems will outgrow our capabilities. So the only solution that we have is security automation. And in some areas, not in all, but in some areas, it is actually quite simple to make the point. So and my favorite example is vulnerability management. Today, and probably since a couple of years, it is totally impossible. It's a joke when you try to do your vulnerability management in OT with manual labor, just with a bunch of guys and gals who sift through the publications of MITRE or NIST or the vendors. You are fooling yourself. Today we are talking about a total of 206,000 CVEs. Multiply that by the number of installations. Certainly at any given site you are not affected of all those 206,000, but here's the problem. You have to know that whole batch of CVEs in order to identify what affects me, okay? And it gets worse. You have to do that again and again and again, because those CVEs do change. Also, let me point out, in case you didn't know, for the newcomers, it is total nonsense to only look at the latest CVEs, because we are affected by CVEs from many, many years ago, like 10 years ago. Right? That's a luxury that IT usually doesn't have to deal with that. We have to deal with that. And then you have to be aware of them. They might have changed. All of a sudden that severity was raised to critical, or the CVSS base score was changed, etc. You cannot do that manually. If you don't have automation, let me be very frank about this, then you're fooling yourself if you think you're doing vulnerability management. So that would be a very simple example. Another example would be asset inventory. You cannot, if you don't have an automatic collection for that, you don't have an asset inventory. And I think there are a couple of other spaces where this applies, and this is what I would like to see as the positive side of things. Today we do have this technology, so we can call that solved. We just need to actually use those tools and limit the sparse human capital to situations where it is actually needed. But trust me, this whole audience here would not be sufficient in order to just do the vulnerability management for one of the mid or larger sized American manufacturing companies. It wouldn't suffice. So even if you would dedicate the task to a sweatshop, it wouldn't work. So therefore, we must introduce automation, and we must make better use of the talent that we have. And in my opinion, the talent is excellent. So I have no complaints there.
Okay, no complaints. I like that.
Oh, yeah.
Megan, would you like to talk workforce, or do you want to shift to threat?
I'll touch on workforce. So I don't know why, but as you were speaking, it kind of reminded me of the quote. I can't remember if it was Socrates or Plato, and we often don't know because they were student and teacher anyway, but the phrase goes something about, we would have a utopian society when kings become philosophers or philosophers become kings, right? I view it as we would have better results in critical infrastructure protection when cybersecurity people become emergency managers or emergency managers become cybersecurity people. I was an emergency manager that became a cybersecurity person. When I think about things like workforce, I think of the IBEW. I think of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I think about the intensive training that they go through in deploying equipment and operating safety critical equipment. And to my knowledge, cybersecurity is kind of an afterthought. So why not start with well-run organizations that have huge manpower that are often playing a part in installing and commissioning our equipment as system integrators? You want to talk about like priority and making an impact, Ralph? Like that's where we need to start, because when you look at the data, what's actually really hurting us is I can make a great product, I can make a secure system. That system is incorrectly installed by a system integrator and we've got some product just hanging out on the internet, it doesn't matter, all the work, it just went away. So again, I think that we need to upskill large masses. We need to stop being so vain in cyber, thinking that we're the only people that can do this. We need to start with the basics and begin training the people. And to your point, I do like this point, you need to tell them and you need to crawl, walk, run, and tell them exactly what do we expect from the electricians? What do we expect from the system integrators? How does this work? And the last point I'll make is more along the lines of incident response. I've brought up in many occasions, everybody's like, oh my God, Megan Samford's talking about ICS for ICS again. But 85% of our cyber response capability is in the private sector. We see laws like the cyber incident reporting law. Great, yeah, we should have that, totally agree. But once they've reported it, what are you gonna do? You don't have a consistent or standardized way to mobilize your cyber responders, so what does it matter? So maybe we should pick up other things, again, borrowing from other industries that have responded to events for the last 50, 70, 100 years, right? They save lives every day. Follow things like incident command system that just makes sense, and we can have force multipliers in our industry for workforce.
I heard, please, don't be shy. I heard two things there, though, that were kind of interesting in our talk. The one is the idea that I think, Zach, both you and Ralph talked about, where a key part of succeeding is to bend the curve of need for the workforce. So we've got to stop needing so many more people. We've got to find ways of doing that, automation being one approach. But that's really important. I don't hear that as much. There's this idea, it's a need, we got to fill it with people. I think that's really important. And Megan, you used the P word again. We've heard it a few times here, priority. You said you had the priority. And Ralph, you've brought that up. We can't do it all. We'd like to do it all. A lot of times we know what would be good things. I'll let you go first this time, Megan. Oh, you want to say something?
And I'll turn it right over to you, because I appreciate your point about being people being emergency or incident managers. I say that cyber professionals need to be risk managers as well, right? Because then that goes back to that prioritization. I can work on 10 things today. Which one will make us less vulnerable or more resilient, as opposed to gee, I really do like doing patching today.
Well, let me throw a hard question at you. And this was one that'll make Rob Lee angry, so
Write this down.
no applause for that. I want to get him on stage next year. Please don't get me in trouble. We talk about priorities, and I see so much attention from the government, from vendors, from the media on detection and threat intel. And I've talked, Rob and I have this discussion a lot. I say, look, I talk to a lot of asset owners. They're just not ready for that. They need to do, in a priority thing, they need to do this and this and this and this. And then maybe they're ready. Not that it's not good or would be helpful. And then Rob, just to be fair, his response is, look, it's 2023. They need to be doing both now. It's an and situation. Megan, have we gone too far in threat intel, or are you more in the camp that, look, you got to be doing this today, even if you're not doing all these other things?
So I think that you can't do risk management unless you can first do asset management. So don't talk to me about risk management unless you can manage your assets, number one. The second point, I think, is direct exposure. We have a lot of, you said low-hanging fruit. Yes, we do. I feel like in many ways, like the 100-day sprint or the 100-day challenge, I forget the name of that effort, what it really should have been about was a 100-day effort to get your crap off the internet. I think that would have provided more value to the nation.
Ralph, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look back at the discussion over the last couple of years on ICS security, and if you just think about the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? Where would this discussion be located? You know, that you remember that circle where you have discover, protect, detect, respond, and what was the remediate or something like that. Recover, yes, thanks. Then that circle would look like like an ugly shaped object where the detection, which is at the lower part, it's just overgrown. It's totally overgrown. So I think that didn't help the community, especially because those damn hackers didn't deliver, right? So let's just imagine you have all that detection technology installed, you have your SOC, and all they find day in, day out is false positives. That's a bad idea. On the other hand, and now I'm getting back to the prioritization, what about incident response? That is such an undervalued discipline that is actually shocking, especially if we consider that the majority of asset owners is unprepared for these ransomware attacks that we have discussed already. And if I have to consider that I will be a victim of any of these types of attacks, as we have seen with Colonial Pipeline, etc., and if I also know positively that I will be in very bad shape when I don't have my ducks in a row when the disaster strikes, well, then it would definitely be a smart idea to prepare in time. And by the way, that's another field where you can pull out excellent metrics just like that. Right, excellent. So it's very easy to measure the maturity of your incident response efforts, and there is enough literature out here, so I don't need to do a talk on that. And this is, in my opinion, totally undervalued, and I think you feel the same way. One thing that we should focus on, unfortunately, it's not as sexy as talking about the kryptonite and the cyanide and the pipe dream and all that stuff that's somewhere in outer space, right? And which is so happily caught up by the media. So they're not actually doing a good job in promoting our cause, in my opinion.
Well, you'll get the last word.
I just want to touch real quick on the threat intel. I think there are important places for it, but in some cases I think that it's an advanced skill for so many of the different people that are out there and different industries. In verticals in general, asset owners in particular, some of the things that we haven't done. So, why do you need threat intel to know that ransomware is a big problem?
Yep.
And so once again, if Rob Lee were here, we'd say, let's get some of the easy stuff done, some of the basic stuff, the things we know are happening to us, and worry about those advanced persistent threats, somewhere else.
So I have to jump in here, and I'm gonna, this is from Maggie Morgani, so I'm gonna attribute her. I think that you just created a VC structure to fund cosmic persistent threat intelligence.
Yes.
And the name of the new product is that it's out of this world.
There you go. Hey,
Yeah.
that's
There you
it.
go.
That's Ralph.
There you go.